the Deschutes Public Library podcast. I'm your host, Michael Rivera, and today we're discussing the new and updated spaces being implemented in libraries across the district. I'm joined today by Mayra, DPL's Library Operations Manager. Her department is responsible for the day-to-day operations of each library and serves as our primary customer interface. Mayra, can you tell us a little bit more about what your department does at the library?
Yeah, I think you described it really well. But I get the very proud and wonderful fortune of working with all the staff at all of the physical library branches. And I say that, and I don't take it lightly. You know, it's 6 branches that make up DPL currently. And every interaction that we have within the building with customers, with staff with one another, all of that falls under library operations. So I really see it as this kind of dynamic role that gets to work in all areas of Central Oregon with all staff, with all communities that we reach. Because of that, it's also a really collaborative role. And at the heart of it all, really, if we get down to the bottom of it, this role is nothing but customer service.
Mm-hmm. So as our primary interface, and you're the first to receive customer service, you all also are the first to receive feedback from the community about what we're doing. And I'm just curious with the new spaces. I know it's only been a couple weeks for this building. We're in La Pine right now that's been open. And Sisters just opened last week. But what kind of feedback have you gotten about what customers think of the new spaces and what other feedback that you gotten before the spaces opened?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head again with that, in that this department really hears the community's wants and needs first. All of our staff that are at the forefront, they're keeping tabs on the things that we have to say no to, or the things that aren't services that we offer yet. And so the nice part about that is we hear directly day to day how our physical spaces are impacting our communities, things that they need to do, their day-to-day lives. And so some of the feedback here, I love it. I love that we're here at La Pine. One of the things I'll just kind of reference is people walk in and the first thing that we hear repeatedly is, wow, it feels so open. Ironically, one of the things we also hear is it smells like new building, which I only say that just to explain how much our physical buildings and the ambiance we have is such a multi-sensory experience to begin with. Then you add the layers of, we also provide services that then impact people's lives. So I think it's really exciting to see that our staff and the community are in conversation day to day, telling us what it is they need, what it is they would like, and what it is that would make their lives better, easier, or what's missing. And I think it puts us in really a direct conversation to make our services a direct reflection of the communities we're in. So I think that with the revamp of these buildings beforehand, it really started with those dialogues of, during the COVID lockdown and coming out of COVID lockdown, of what are things that we were missing. We heard a lot about folks in our community needing to telecommute and telework. And our buildings in the past weren't really structured that way. A lot of our buildings had been made before the 2000s. So, cloud computing, teleconferencing, all these things were things that hadn't been thought of. And so our physical layouts of our buildings didn't support that. And I think now, with that conversation constantly happening between community and staff, I think we've been able to really reimagine spaces that can be flexible and that can work and be responsive.
Mm-hmm. And what I like about Sisters and La Pine specifically is we had both spaces for 20 years. And now, we saw the layout previously. We got to see how people were using it and how that changed over time since the buildings were originally constructed. And I remember coming here and seeing people working in the corners, just on their laptops, and there'll be programs going on in the middle of the building. And now there's smaller rooms for that type of activity. There's one right behind us right here that can hold 4 to 6 people, and then a slightly larger one back there, in addition to our main community room. And so I think it's really cool to see how the new buildings are addressing those needs and those that weren't necessarily being fulfilled before in new and creative ways.
Yeah.
But as such, our communities across the county are experiencing a lot of growth. How do you think the new community spaces in Redmond and Stevens Ranch are going to address that growth?
Yeah, I think you have it spot on. I think just giving the example of the 3 different rooms we have here at La Pine, I want to talk a little bit about those, but then kind of dive into their physical placement. So that's something we wanted to be ridiculously mindful of, is how do we place these rooms so that they are, taking up the real estate that they need to take up, but also allowing for flexibility. So I'll give an example of here in La Pine, since we're in here. We've got an operable wall, and what that really means is it's movable. It's a glass wall, so for the most part, you see visibility. But it goes into our community room, and that community room is the largest room that fits the most amount of occupants, and you can have the most amount of an event or something going on in there. And what we've done is we've been really intentional with that door, that operable wall. A whole wall can open up and open that space up even further so that your occupancy then increases so that more people can come into that program. So I think it's just been a way for us to be intentional about the community can physically see what's going on in there, but then we can welcome more people in as well. And beforehand, we had 4 actual physical walls. You can't move a wall. As much as you wanted to let more people in, you couldn't. And now with these kind of mindful decisions and really being curious about how our spaces are being used, we're now able to make a dynamic space that isn't really confined by 4 walls. It's confined by about 3, and we still have occupancies to be mindful, but now we can grow. And I think that's a key example for communities like Redmond or Stevens Ranch, where those spaces or those communities are growing. And we don't quite know. We don't have the magic, I'm going to restart that statement. Okay. We don't have a magic ball to look into and say, oh, in 10 years, this community will need X, Y, Z. But hopefully we've been intentional just enough to be able to grow that space and be able to be flexible with it. And I think that's what we hit on this time around. We really wanted a dynamic feeling of being responsive and hearing that feedback and being able to grow with it. And I think we've just got it right about now. I'm really excited to see how the spaces are used. We have physically put them into place right now, but now we're coming into a sort of era of DPL where our community is going to come in and use it, and we're going to learn how to use it. So it's very much that give and take happening live.
Mm-hmm. And those operable walls, I'm not completely sure if it's going to be the same in Redmond and Stevens Ranch, but at least in La Pine and Sisters, they're glass. So you can, from the outside, see what's going on, whereas before it kind of felt like the community rooms were more compartmentalized and off to the side, and you couldn't necessarily see what was going on in there unless there was a sign posted on the door. So you can kind of see, maybe you're just browsing in the library and you happen to see something that piques your interest, and you can go and explore more of those activities happening in your community. So I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
But another major feature of all our new community spaces, at least the large ones, is that they will be accessible after hours. They have their own entrance. So even if the library itself is closed, folks will be able to reserve and use those meeting rooms after hours. So how do you think the community will benefit from that access?
Oh man, I think that's another one where you've hit the nail on the head. That's a bit of feedback that we heard for a really long time. And that is one of the hardest dichotomies to it's a high quality challenge to face, right? You have your community wanting your building more hours. What a great thing. What that tells me is we have something in high demand and we need to find a way to meet it. The trick there becomes, obviously, if we extend our hours, we need the staff to staff it. And we do want our staff to have work-life balance. That's a core value here. And so we had these opposing this really opposing challenge in our lab. And I think that when we hit the drawing board and said, how do we create a dynamic space where someone could use the full capability of this space during after hours, where we don't have to be there all the time, or we can, be flexible with how we allow folks into our spaces. So for our community rooms, what we've designed during the design process is there a way we can partition the library proper from the actual community room and restrooms and access to water so that those spaces can be used after hours? Now that's the physical layout, so that's one step to it, and the physical access to it, but then there's the software infrastructure that goes along with that. So again, this is definitely a multi-layered kind of scenario that we were facing. So I think pairing, software that's out there in the world that we now know exists, and hearing all of that feedback from our community and saying, hey, we would really love this. This would benefit our lives. And then pairing it with us kind of saying, these are our new needs, our new demands out of our poor architecture team, and they found a way to marry those two ideas and help us find the software that will make it work, the physical layout of the building that will make it work, And here we are now sitting in a building that does have that ability to be partitioned. So as we move forward, this is one of those things where we are going into new territory and we are testing it out and learning it. And pretty soon here at Lapine, that will be one of the capabilities that we are ready to roll out. So I think it really shows how your physical space tied with, your software infrastructure, with that feedback loop you get from your community, all of that plays a role into really making sure that we are actually being responsive. So I talked about that earlier of how do we be responsive, but now that we've heard it and now that we know that it takes, this iterative loop, now we're in the place where we're implementing, and it's really neat to see. I would love to see, an early morning coffee with a cop or something like that, or coffee with your congressman, and then maybe a late night business mixer. And beforehand, we were really limited. And so now those kind of programs, those kind of events for the community are feasible. And I think it really does come from hearing the feedback, going back to the drawing loop, or going back to the drawing board, and then making it actually happen and putting everything into place so that policy supports it.
Mm-hmm. And as a public entity, our whole mission is to serve the community. That's the whole reason that we're here. And it actually, we just did a podcast on freedom of information, and it kind of ties back to that. Libraries are the place where you get information. Libraries are the place where you learn and communities come together. And so it's our duty to maximize the amount of space and the amount of time folks have access to that. And with, the library proper, we have staffing limitations, and we have to have certain space for the staff to be able to work, and we have to provide reasonable hours and a good work-life balance for them.
Right.
But since we have the space, and the community rooms were not being used previously before they had this access, now they're going to have an expanded amount of hours. They can use that without necessarily needing library staff. And they'll have access to bathrooms and the little kitchenettes, and all of the other facilities that are available in each of our community rooms. So I think it's very exciting to be able to offer that service to the communities across the county. Every single library is getting that, and I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, I think it'll be great to see how communities use it. And again, this is such a growing opportunity for DPL as an institution, as a public serving institution. So I think it's just one of those journeys where we're on it and we invite you to go along with us.
Mm-hmm. So with Lapine and Sisters now open, what are you most excited about in these revitalized spaces? The community rooms, the children area, the new teen spaces? What are you most excited about personally?
Such a great thing. I'm really excited. We grew the collection. We grew the physical floor plans. So not the physical space of the building, but we did grow the amount of community dedicated physical space. So it is really exciting to me. I think the experiences I'm most looking forward to is to see family members, neighbors come in together and find something for each age range in their group. We have multi-generational communities, multi-generational family and households. And I hope that from the smallest to the tallest and from the youngest to the wisest, I hope everyone is finding their nook and cranny here at the library. We were super intentional with our early learning spaces, our teen and tween spaces, and then with our adult spaces. And so I hope that dynamic thought and mindfulness is coming through. And I hope we see those experiences of, a grandparent and their grandchild together, in lap reading a book together. But then the grandparent's like, okay, we're good. You can play. I'll go to my fireplace and find a book for myself. So I really hope that we are starting to hit the nail on the head where everyone has a space to come to within this big, broad roof. I think for me, that is one of the most exciting things about Sisters and Lapine so far that we've been able to witness. Looking a little bit forward at Redmond and Stevens Ranch, one of my favorite things coming there, which is new to DPL, is the concept of a makerspace or a creative room. And so to me, that just adds more. We know that through creativity, it's such a higher level of brain activity and collaboration that happens. So I talked about that multi-generational learning. We're just going to amp that up even further and see it happening with a tangible product. Mm-hmm. And that is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. And those maker spaces are going to be primarily in the larger libraries like Redmond and Stevens Ranch. What kind of programs and activities do you foresee us being able to offer in those spaces?
Yeah, one of our initiatives right now is to get out in the community and hear what the community wants. We have been hearing from the greater maker community in Central Oregon about, what are the most popular things, what are the things that folks look for. A lot of the times in maker spaces, we'll have the equipment and the tools and some of the machinery, but above all, it's the physical space, the ability to collaborate. And that's what we've been really mindful is this is where it ties back into how we look at our spaces and how they can be moved and adapt. We want to make sure that we have work tables. We want to make sure that we have the proper infrastructure like a sink or proper ventilation for whatever it is we're doing. And so to me, I think that what we're looking to do there is really create, again, dynamic spaces that are responsive, where if, today it's 3D printing, but tomorrow might be laser cutting, that is the thing our communities are interested. I want to make sure that we have the flexibility to mold to that which the community wants to do, and then just watch people evolve and create. I think for libraries in the past, we're very much about stimulating intellect. We have our books, we have our library of things we want people to do. But now this is a new venture for us. Now we want people to make, and it can happen in our building, it can happen at their home, but we really want to be the catalyst for creation. And I think that is another one of those exciting, beautiful, collaborative things that will happen in a physical community space. And I think it's about time that we dived into that. I'm excited to see the tangible products that people create. One of my favorite, I had worked in a makerspace years ago, and one of my favorite products was I had a father and son duo working on a potential patent. And I won't share too much because that is their intellectual property. But it just is very exciting to see someone take an idea it went from paper to computer to physically printed out. And it was also one of those multi-generational. You had a father-son duo. And I can't think of another place where it happens free of charge. I can think of places where it happens and, you pay, rightfully so, there's materials and resources. But I think with the beauty of the library is we are trying to do as much as possible for free, of course, within the reality of what we can do.
Well, and it's the place where if you get stuck working on your project, all the information happens to also be there.
It's beautiful, right?
People are there to help guide you to that information. And also, if you've ever worked on a creative project, sometimes you just realize that you just need a big blank table.
Yes.
You just need the space. And I've worked on projects, and sometimes it's exhausting just taking your kitchen table and you're like, all right, well, I'm going to make a mess of this. So I have to get everything set up, and then I have to tear everything down when I'm done. Just thinking about that's exhausting. So it's nice to have a space where it's like, hey, I just need a table for an afternoon. You can go and work on whatever you need to work on in that space.
Yeah, table and a whiteboard go a long way, don't they?
Yeah, they sure do. They sure do. Continuing on the path with Redmond and Stevens Ranch, both of those new buildings are going to have outdoor civic patios, which is new for us at the library, at least in this capacity. They're going to be large. There's going to be a lot of seating areas and room for programming. So how do you foresee the public taking advantage of those new spaces?
Oh, that's such a great question. I'm going to cheat a little, actually, if you don't mind. Half of my answer, I'll say, I hope we discover new ways that people use it. And I hope that we haven't thought of all the uses, because that would be so boring if we thought of everything. I hope that people find more. But I'll backtrack a little bit and kind of talk about the utility of those spaces. In a lot of our dialogue so far, Michael, we've talked about the inside and what's under the roof. But I think that we haven't opened up the conversation of the fact that our library actually does extend further. It is the sky underneath. We have a certain parcel of real estate, so to speak, and so much could be done in a plaza, that extends out further. I talked about our community room being a physical space for the community to meet, but so can a plaza. Central Oregon, not to brag, but has some of the most beautiful weather we've seen. And there would be a beautiful way for us to take the physical space that the library has and take advantage of that weather during certain times of the year and create events, meetups, all kinds of activities, all the things that we could do outdoors. So I think what that does is that helps us really, we have a list and tons of ideas of things we want to do. And some of them happen underneath the building, and some of them could be both, could be one or the other. And I think that just grows even more. So one thing that's exciting for me is, I talked about how we have that operable wall in a lot of our spaces where we grow outward, or we grow outward into the inside. We grow into the building and expand our occupancy that way and expand the ability for that program to grow. But for me, the exciting thing is, well, what if we have the outdoor and the indoor, and we just grow into a full-blown location for a whole community-wide event to happen? So I think, to me, it just becomes, we want to be this community space. We see that we see that folks come and do work, they do play underneath our roof, but now it's time for us to think dynamically and creatively of how do we bring that even outward. And I think that the intentional design behind these plazas is ways to make sure that we have outlets out there for music, maybe, or outlets out there for a viewing. What if we do an outdoor movie during the summer? That would be lovely. And I think it just carries out all the things that our community wants to do with us, just kind of grows even more so. Now we can do it also in our building and under the stars. And I think that's just a magical thing. It extends our impact so much further. And I have to say, I think this is also one of those things that's a direct results of what we've heard from our community. Sometimes it happens really organically and like, hey, what would be really cool? And then this actually comes to fruition. And I think that to me, that's such a beautiful thing to watch, a casual idea that someone shared at our service point, and all of a sudden it becomes a reality.
Well, and there's a concept of people needing a third place. You have your home, you have your work, but that third place is somewhere that you want to get information, that you want to meet with your community, and having that outdoor space it's just a nice place to hang out where there's not a pay to play. You don't have to go buy a coffee to go hang out there. You can just show up, use the benches, use the tables, and just hang out, just enjoy the space. And Stevens Ranch has a larger parcel of land, so it has a nice large area outdoors. And Redmond has a smaller space, but still a nice space outdoors. And it's located right at the Civic Center of downtown Redmond, which I think is just going to be really special. And while you're out and about doing things out in Redmond and you have some time in between appointments or something like that, the library is right there for you to go and utilize. I think that's all I have for you. So thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and record this podcast. I hope this conversation really helps inform customers about the updates that are coming to their communities. Every community across Deschutes County is getting benefits from these new libraries. Sisters and Sisters and Lapine are first. Sun River's up next, and Redmond will also be opening next fall. So a lot of exciting things happening. If you want to listen to this podcast, you can find us wherever podcasts are found. We also upload these to YouTube. Thanks for listening, and catch you on the next one.